Alright, hi guys. So it's Monday the 4th. What we're reviewing today is just solving radicals. So we're just gonna kind of review how to solve radicals. And kind of the goal for today is to break it into three easy steps that you can use pretty much every time. Um, yeah, so that's kind of it. Again, solving radicals, the goal is to make it as easy as possible. So when you guys come across this problem on your culminating activity, it's not too overwhelming, right? So if you see here, kind of like the three steps that we're going to do, we're going to make it more clear over the next couple of examples. But the first step is going to be to isolate this radical. Keep in mind that the radical is just like that square root guy there. So we want to get him by himself. So in order to do that, we're going to use side makes. We're going to work from the outside in. We get to get rid of that 2, so we subtract the 2 from both sides. In order to get rid of that radical, or in order to get rid of the square root, we square both sides, and then it's just kind of a matter of solving. And that's legit all three steps. All right. So, like we just said, the three steps are to isolate, get rid of the radical, solve for x. So the first thing we're going to do is to isolate. If a radical is that square root of x plus 7, I can't touch that 7. The only thing I can move is whatever is outside of that radical, whatever is outside of that house. So the only thing on the outside of the house is going to be the 10. If I have positive 10 right now, the only thing I could do is subtract it. So I'm going to have to subtract 10 from both sides. The first thing we did was isolate the radicals. So that's what we did there. The first question of the day is going to be, what do we do now? What is our next step? We isolated completely. So I need you guys to tell me what's the next step. Hopefully you remember that the next step is just to get rid of the radical, right? If you weren't sure about that, you could just look at step number 2 over here. You have to get rid of that radical. In order to get rid of that radical, or in other words, the square root, it's pretty simple. Anytime you come across the square root, in order to get rid of it, you're going to square both sides. So you should square the left-hand side, you should square the right-hand side. When you square the radical, these bad boys cancel each other out. So like if you're looking here, the only thing that happens is the square root of x plus 7 squared becomes x plus 7. When it comes across this number here, it's kind of simple with this case because we have 1 squared and 1 times 1 is 1. So we're going to keep that 1 there. All right. Our third step is super, super simple. We're just going to be solving for x. So I accidentally got rid of that other problem, but remember we had x plus 7 equals 1. We're going to subtract 7 from both sides, which is what we're showing here. 1 minus 7 is in fact negative 6. So our final answer there is going to be x equals negative 6. And like low-key, that's it. All right. Oh, there it is. LOL. So x plus 7 equals 1. Subtract that 7 from both sides. We end up with negative 6. Okay, so we're moving on to the next problem. We have number 2, which is 17 minus 2 times the square root of 3x plus 10 equals 1. I have this here, but again, I'm going to ask you guys, what is the first step? If our goal is to isolate the radical, what are we going to do first? And go ahead and tell me why. What are we moving first and why? So hopefully you guys are able to reason through the work that we have here. The first thing we're going to be moving is that 17. The reason we're going to move the 17 first is because we're working from the outside in. So if this is where a radical is, if you want to get the radical by himself, we have 2 things to move. We have to move the 17 and we have to move the negative 2. In this case, however, because the 17 is the furthest thing from the radical, we're going to move him first and then we get rid of the negative 2. So we have those 2 steps there. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's going on. I want you to tell me what is happening from this step to this step. What operation did we do? All right, so hopefully you guys recognize that legit all we did was divide. We divided by that negative 2. That's what those 2 fractions mean, right? That negative 2 divided by the other negative 2, those bad boys cancel each other out. Negative 16 divided by negative 2 is going to be 8 because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Now that we have it simplified like this, step number 2, as always, is to get rid of that radical. So if we have the square root, we need to get rid of the square root. In order to get rid of the square root that we see here, we're going to go ahead and square both sides. When you square a square root, they kind of just like cancel each other out. So you have 3x plus 10. So like that square root of 3x plus 10, when I squared that, we ended up with just whatever was inside, which was in this case is going to be 3x plus 10. On the other side, however, we had an 8. We squared the 8. 8 squared is 8 times 8, which is in fact 64. From here, go ahead and tell me, what is step number 3 going to be? What are we going to do now? Step number 3 is arguably the most important step, because step number 3 is when we actually get x by itself. We're going to go ahead and solve. So we have 3x plus 10 equals 64. Subtract that 10 over, divide that 3. When I subtract the 10 from the positive 10, those cancel each other out, so I'm left with just 3x. 64 minus 10, 54. Divided by 3 on both sides, we get x equals 18. Legit, it's just these three steps. So isolate the radical, get rid of the radical, solve for x. So this will kind of be like our last big question. If I were to give you this equation and I told you to solve for x, what would the first 2 steps be? So we're going to have 2 questions here. The first step is going to be the first question is going to be, what is the first step? The second question is going to be, what is the second step? All right. So we're trying to keep it super, super light for you guys. Tomorrow you're going to go over tomorrow you're going to go over rationals. So those fractions. On Wednesday, we are going to post something new. It's completely optional. So if you guys want to do it, great. It's mostly for those seniors who are going to be taking your test starting Wednesday. Again, periods 1 and 2. If you're a senior, you'll be testing on Wednesday. If you're a senior in periods 3 or 4, you're going to be testing on Thursday. And if you're a senior in 5th or 6th hour, you are going to be testing on Friday. All right. Please do keep in mind that those assessments are going to be on School City. If you need any help at all, feel free to email us at any point during the day. Other than that, please don't be too worried about it. It's about 12 questions long. Just try your best. The majority of it is based around probability, which is what we did over this distance learning stuff. But for the most part, it's pretty simple probability. And then 1 or 2 questions on this radical stuff, and 1 or 2 questions on what you guys went over on Thursday, which was kind of just like all that Q1 polynomial stuff, and then 1 or 2 questions on Q3, which is going to be rational equations, which are just fractions and logs. So the last reviews that you guys are going to get are those. All right. Again, as always, feel free to email us with any questions. Super proud of all of you, and I hope you have a great day. All right, great. Thanks.